Hello and welcome to another edition of the podcast I can never remember the name of, and did those feet. And I'm joined as ever by Carl. Hello, Carl.
Hello, Peter.
Carl, we're going to talk about the second division. And in case that seems like a pretty limp thing to talk about, let's just get it clear that the second division then is very different organism from the second division now and or from the championship now. In what way is that the case then?
Well, I think the biggest difference is there just wasn't the same gulf between the top two divisions that exist now, and there's many illustrations of that fact. But to take just one that maybe illustrates the point, that in all the years that we cover from the war up until 1970, there were only two teams that played in the first division in every season.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, can
Yeah,
you name them?
Manchester United and
Manchester's
Arsenal,
one, yeah, Manchester United, absolutely,
and,
and
and Arsenal
oh,
was the other.
Arsenal, of course, yeah,
Yeah, and just by way of comparison, at the time that we're talking now, there's been 33 seasons of the Premier League,
yes,
so a lot longer. Um, but there's been six teams that's never
yeah,
been out of
no,
the Premier League,
and will never
and,
be.
and plus there's three up, three down, and it was
Yeah,
two up, two down in our time.
very true.
So there's many illustrations, and we'll illustrate it further. We talk about individual teams, but the gulf wasn't was did just didn't exist. It's not, of course, that there's no difference between the first and second division by any means, but nothing like the gulf that exists now. And it really wasn't unusual for sides to get promoted and really hit the ground running. And in their often in their first season in the first division to do really very well indeed.
It's an amazing thought. I mean, you're sitting in front of a team of all-stars who actually were put together in the second division, and I've got two in front of behind me who were put together in the second division, made in the second division, but then went straight into a term. By the way, Shankly at Liverpool had been, this was his third, was his second season or third season up. Revie,
Yeah,
it was his first season up. Revie takes Leeds to second in the table. They almost win the title in his first year up there. I mean,
that's
it's so
right.
exciting. The idea that clubs can come up from the second. Imagine Leeds doing that this coming season. Uh,
It's I mean,
Unimaginable.
I suppose Leicester City a few years ago proved that nothing's quite impossible, but
Yeah,
it's the nearest thing to it.
I
That
reckon that in the course of the period that we're talking about, or the 60s at least, we talk specifically about the 60s. I reckon that there's at least five teams who come. These are we're looking at two of them who come up and really add immense amounts to the first division. They're fired by momentum from their promotion from the second division, but at least five, and maybe more than that, who add an immense amount to the mix and are really new powerhouses.
I mean, can I just throw in a few just very quick stats to illustrate the point that I thought were interesting? I'm sorry, you just said the 60s, but I must admit I looked at throughout our period,
Oh yeah,
and so just very quickly, I looked at each season from the second season of league football after the war so that I could look at the promoted teams
yeah.
through to the 69-70 season. So this is 23 league seasons.
Okay,
And in those 23 league seasons,
yeah.
two promoted teams won the league. I thought even more surprising than that,
Go on. Who are the
only
two?
so the two were Tottenham
Yeah, in 51,
in 51 and Ipswich Town
in 61. Sorry,
in
62.
62. I thought even more surprising than that. And let's see what you think about how surprising it is. There were only five teams relegated,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
and
Shame.
again, compared to modern football, at the time of that we're talking, the last two Premier League seasons, all three teams have been relegated.
Yeah, they have.
Who've come up for two seasons in a row. So that's six relegated teams. Admittedly, three up, 3 down now
Yeah.
and only 2 then. But 5 teams out of in effect 46 examples
It's
who were relegated,
minuscule, isn't it? Yes.
which is what you would get pretty much if you drew by lottery. And just finally, I went through how well each team did, and the teams that won the second division, their average league position the following season in the first division was 11th, and the team that finished second, their average league position was 13th.
Amazing. Yeah. So they
So,
really reinforced the.
so in effect, the average finishing position out of 22 teams was to finish 12th.
Yes. Yes. I mean, my
Which,
impression is if we look at the. Sorry. Yes. Go on. Finish off because that was interesting.
I'm just going to finish the thought.
Yeah.
Repeating the point, really, just so different than football today.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in the 60s, certainly, we're talking about. I mean, Ipswich, as you say, came up. Ipswich were quite. They only really just aced the title. They could well have lost the title, but they did well to stay up at all because I think
Absolutely.
at the beginning of the season they were favourites to go down. And in fact, I suspect that the intention was. But you see, these teams are driven. They're put together by their run of good results in the second division, and they maintain the momentum and carry
Yeah,
it on. And
that's
it
what it
doesn't
is.
get beaten out of them, which is what happens nowadays. Is it, teams
Yeah.
by Christmas you can see who's going to go down. Liverpool were the next team, I think, in the 60s, who really made a huge difference to. So now they'd taken a long time to get out of the second division. They'd been there for 10 years and had been really drifting until Shankly turned up and fired the whole machine up. But you look at their results, their achievements. Their second season in the first division, they win the title. Their first season they finish 8th. Second season they win the title. Third season they win the cup, as we got behind us. Fourth season they win the title. These are not just adding, to the sort of they're dominating. It seems to me, looking at those Liverpool and Leeds teams especially, those teams were put together in the second division. I was thinking through with Liverpool, how many of these players were with the club in the second division? Actually, probably practically all of them. And
That's right.
the same was true of Leeds. I mean, don't forget, with that Leeds team, the team that's behind you, they've all come through the system. They've all come through. They all remember, whether they were youngsters or in the youth team, whatever, they all remember Leeds when they were down the bottom of the second division. So there's a momentum which which they carry from their promotions, which doesn't seem to happen anymore. I don't know why that would be. Chelsea were then my third team that came up and absolutely dominated or at least made a huge contribution, promoted in 63 to finish 5th, 3rd and 5th, reached the cup final in 67, win the cup in 1970. They're a bona fide first division team by this stage, but of course they're also full of homegrown talent. So these players have come through. Bear in mind when people like Ron Harris and Johnny Hollins and Peter Osgood and Peter Bonetti were Chelsea juniors, and they're all homegrown, aren't they? I mean, that's another feature
Yeah.
we need to talk about is how do these players arrive at these clubs? Because it does change over the course of the 60s, I think. Leeds promoted in 64, runners up in the league, runners up in the cup, first season. They're the team of the season in 65.
I think in a way for the Leeds' first season was arguably just as remarkable as Ipswich's, really,
Yeah,
because I mean, almost typical Leeds for what was to come in the following decade. They didn't win a trophy, but they nearly won the double.
that's true.
So they only lost the league on goal average, and the team that they lost it to was Manchester United. And I think a lot of judges think that United side that was sort of the peak of the best law Charlton team.
Right.
Might not be
65.
the most famous achievement, which of course was winning the European Cup, but in terms of the football that they played, I think a lot of people think that it was that team that was the peak United side of the 60s, and Leeds pushed them all the way. I mean, to lose it on goal average, clearly Leeds could have won the league. They had a bit of an epic semi-final that went to a replay against Manchester United, and they knocked Manchester United out of the cup. And the cup final, that they had against Liverpool went to extra time.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
So yeah, it was remarkable. Like I said, most of those players had come through the system. But what players, I mean, they had. I mean, there was a young Bremner, Johnny Giles. He'd been bought from Manchester United, but he'd left because he was sort of disenchanted. He was at Leeds.
Jack Charlton had been there since the days of John Charles.
Yes,
He was a
that's
real
right.
fixture at the club. But they
Yeah,
seem to bring through players like Reaney, for example, who, without having a particularly spectacular international career, he did actually play for England, Reaney. But he was
yeah,
such a one club man, wasn't he? He was such a valuable part of the fixture in the system there. And
yeah.
now
They
that's
were
interesting.
really consistent players.
I think the it's interesting to think because I think a lot of if you go through the Leeds team, so Sprake, Reaney, these were both homegrown. Hunter, Charlton, both homegrown. Bremner, homegrown. Lorimer, Eddie Gray, Frank Gray, all homegrown players. And Leeds clearly were brilliant at putting that team together. I think things begin to change a little bit towards the end of the decade, because the end of our period, in fact, because we begin to look at, say, teams like Manchester City. Now, Manchester City, let's just get the facts right here. Relegated, promoted in 51, relegated in 63. Of course, they've had a decent 50s. They were FA Cup winners in 56.
Yeah,
They've not been out of the picture. But they finished fifth. When you get promoted, they finished 15th actually, and in their
yeah.
first
So
season,
yeah, they
quite
didn't set
quite
the world
ordinary.
alight in the first season.
What say again?
I say they didn't set the world alight in the first season up,
No, no.
but thereafter they really did.
Well, they did. Go next season in '68. They win the league, and that's the fourth team. So I think I'm right in saying that in the 1960s, 4 out of the 10 championships are won by teams who 5 minutes ago were in the second division. It's an
Mm.
extraordinary
Yes,
number of teams coming. I mean, and of course, now, so it does raise the question, who survived from the old guard? And actually, that's interesting too, because Wolves didn't survive. Well, I mean, did Wolves go down in about 64, 65? I think they did.
I think I can't remember the season, but I think it was sometime in the mid 60s. I
And
can't
they
remember what season it
because
was.
they were the team of the moment in the 50s, but in the
Very
60s
strong.
they were just so this of course there are casualties too. Other teams who had been prominent in the 60s, in the 50s, they were edged out, of course. But what I was going to say about the Manchester City team, why I think it's a bit different, is because a lot of these teams, as we've been saying, have brought through their own players, and they've been blooded in the second division, and the team's been put together in the second division, and they're now ready for the big time. Manchester City is a bit different, isn't it? Because although lots of players came through Manchester City, actually their
Mm.
big stars, Franny Lee signed from Bolton, Colin Bell
Yes,
signed from Bury,
that's
Nick
right.
Summerby was signed from Swindon.
Yes.
The big players at Man City had been elsewhere. And I wonder if, because of course there's an economic basis to what we're talking about here. I wonder if, in a way, the Manchester City were working out of the sort of abolition of the maximum wage. That what inevitably had to happen eventually is that players were going to be seduced by the money. And in that case, it's interesting to note all these teams are big city teams, and we're not
I,
Ipswich.
that's what I was just thinking as you said it.
So the
That
teams that
that's
used to be able to win, a place in the sun like Leicester or Burnley, are being edged out. They are being West Brom. They're being edged out here by big city teams, and in particular, perhaps. Well, I was going to say northern cities: Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds. I don't know. There's
but
no.
also but also Tottenham and Chelsea.
Yeah,
They got
true.
had a good time in the 60s. So it's interesting as well. Some of the connections that it's easy to make. So we talked about Manchester City and then being promoted in the 50s and having a good side in the 50s. And one of the key players in that team was, of course, Don Revie.
It was indeed.
And there you've got the connection with Leeds, and then the other very striking connection, of course, which I know you'd be all over, is that the other side that came up and won the league straight away, Ipswich.
Yes.
Of course, their manager
Yeah.
was not just a part, but a key part of the other promoted team that won the first division, Tottenham,
Yeah, it's true.
uh, in the early 50s. So you've got
Yeah.
some interesting connections.
Yeah. Now that is a very interesting parallel there for Alf Ramsey, that when he won the league with Ipswich in 61, 62, he already had experience. He could say to his players, you
Yes.
know, I've been in a situation before where we won the second division and then went
Mm.
straight in and won the first division. And his players would remember that because 10 years, 11 years before, they would know from
Oh, yes.
their
Yeah.
teenage years that Ramsey had that experience. And therefore, it suggested that that was possible to do that. We could talk a little bit more about Ipswich and the players in Ipswich when we come to talk about, well, let's move on to the players themselves, because it's an extraordinary feature of this period that right from the war to 1970, that, and it does reflect on the quality of the second division, that second division players quite routinely were picked for England. In fact, I was looking today at the lineup for England in the 1958 World Cup playoff match against the Soviet Union, right? So England eliminated from most of these World Cups in fairly humiliating fashion. But in 1958, they reached the group, they reach the sort of next stage after the groups, but it's a playoff against the Soviets and they lose. But
Mm.
that team, so this was a very important game for England. This is the Sweden World Cup. So they had every chance of progressing, but they lost to the Soviet Union in this playoff for the last day, a position in the last stage. But that team actually contained 3 second division players. Incredible
Yes.
to think. But
Yes.
let me just mention who they were: Johnny Haynes, Ronnie Clayton, Alan Accourt. And they were not, I mean,
Yeah.
Johnny Haynes had 50 odd caps for England, was England
Yeah.
captain. Um, but playing in second division for most, a lot of his career, he had 5 seasons or so in the 50s. Playing in
Yeah.
that wasn't a problem. In fact, I looked at where did Fulham finish in that season. I think it was the 57-58 season. And Fulham finished like 12th in the second division. And
Yes.
that didn't stop. There wasn't a problem from the point of view
No.
of selection,
No.
because I think it was a feeling was that it was quite a flat pyramid. I mean, the pyramid now obviously is vertical. If that's the right
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that shape. But in those days, it was pretty flat, and you could be mid-table in the second division and still get picked for England. I think Johnny Haynes was probably England captain while he was in second. So, but I think this is particularly a 50s phenomenon, and that it actually changed in the 60s. I did some calculations here for which players got picked for England when they were playing in the second division. In the 50s, there were 7. Sorry, in the 40s, there were 7. Well, of course, not so many matches.
Yes.
In the 50s, there were 20. So 20 players were picked to play for England while playing in the second division in that decade. And then in the 60s, there were 7, only 7. And
Right.
my feeling about that is that, how to explain that's quite a disparity. So from 20 in the 50s to 7 in the 60s, that is the working out of the abolition of the maximum wage. Because
It's got to be, hasn't it? Yeah,
there,
because there's a reason to there's much more of an incentive for players to move, and the ability of the richer clubs to attract players by paying them more. Whereas Johnny Haynes, presumably, when he was captain of Fulham when they were mid-table in the second division, of captain of England, as you say,
yeah.
presumably he was on the maximum wage.
Well, I think he must have been, yes.
So
And no incentive to move.
if he'd moved to Arsenal,
Yeah.
he would have received no more money.
No, that's right. Yeah, exactly. No,
And
you're on.
no, I was just saying, when we're talking about the players as well, I mean, Haynes is a really good example.
Yeah.
Is there's too many players from the second division for us to talk about all of them. I mean, in the period we're looking at, there were 3 examples of players from the third division playing for England.
Yeah.
But it's not just that it was the odd player who came through and played. It was really key players. Some of the very best players England had. So immediately after the war, there was Frank Swift,
Yeah.
who he was playing in the second division for Manchester City. He's, I would have thought, probably comfortably the best goalkeeper that England produced before Gordon Banks.
Exactly. He is.
You've got Tom Finney.
Yeah.
Some of his caps were earned when he was outside the first division.
Yeah.
In any discussion about the best English footballer ever, he's at least in the conversation.
It's incredible, isn't it? He has 2 seasons in the second division. I mean, you couldn't make it up. As you say,
That's
one
right.
of the best footballers of all time in English
Yeah,
football.
absolutely. Johnny Haynes, who you've already been talking about, and Tommy Lawton, who, again, if you're talking about the best big number nines that England have ever had, absolutely he's in the conversation. So it's not merely those examples which do exist of the second division player who gets a cap here or a cap or two here and there and sometimes struggles. There are examples of that.
Yeah.
But there are examples of players who absolutely were central to the England team while they're still in the second division.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there's some high quality. Another thing I looked at actually was what positions these players played, because I thought that might be interesting to see if there was any patterns in that. So we're talking here again about second division players playing for England. What positions did they play in? And of the sample of 20 players, I picked out 20 I thought were really interesting.
Yeah.
And of those 20, 4 were goalkeepers, 4 were fullbacks, 1 was a centre back, 3 were midfielders, and 8 were forwards. And I wondered if perhaps that's part of the explanation here is that it's actually perhaps just that bit easier to show yourself to your best advantage as a forward if you're playing against second division defences. I mean, that might be a little patronising or a little bit unfair.
Well, there could be something in it.
But high quality forwards as well. Don't forget this. I mean, we're including here Brian Clough, Brian Douglas, who's a doughty performer for Blackburn. These are top quality players who could quite easily have played in Tom Finney, as you mentioned, who quite easily have played in the top division. Terry Payne, of course, of Southampton, who comes into the World Cup squad or comes into the England squad in '63, and is actually, I mean, we talked about England versus the rest of the world in 1963, and Terry Payne, although his calendar consists of trips to places like Norwich and Bury, mixed up with playing against the rest of the world, he actually, nevertheless, he's not out of his depth at all in that company,
No,
and he plays very well in that match. He's actually, I think, he's probably England's best performer. That's perhaps debatable. So it is a.
But there is a spread there, isn't there? It's not all one position. I mean, you could look at it and say that the 4 goalkeepers was maybe symptomatic of England struggling to find a decent keeper after Swift.
Yeah.
But you've got players right across the board. I mean, one thing I found interesting was Alf Ramsey's first cap were playing in the second division.
Yeah.
Well, so he first got in into the England side playing for Southampton.
Yeah.
I think he had only 1 cap as a Southampton player when he was in the second division, but he got injured and lost his place.
Yeah.
At Southampton, but lost his place in the England side to that same Southampton fullback.
I know, incredible. I know, you have to read that twice. He loses his place.
It's so strange.
They've got Southampton in the second division. Have got 2 current England international fullbacks. They've got the 2 best fullbacks. But I suppose if your life is centered around Southampton and you're quite enjoying the football and it's you've got a mortgage, or perhaps that's stretching things a bit for the players at those days, and there's no incentive to go anywhere else, then you might as well. Another thing that struck me actually was interesting about this. So I was interested in who played in World Cup matches, because those seem to me to be the most important. They're the kind of the real highlights, aren't they? I'm making an assumption here, which maybe I'm not entitled to make, because I did wonder how much importance people in those days invested in World Cup matches compared to, for example, to England versus Scotland or British Championship matches.
I think it depends when. I'm not sure exactly when the switch comes, but maybe it's the end of the 50s, start of the 60s that the World Cup becomes the most important.
Exactly. But it was interesting to me that first of all, that the 1950 World Cup squad contains 4 Tottenham players. So Tottenham have just won the second division, bear in mind, 49 to 50. And yet 4 of their players get in. So Ted Ditchburn, Bill Nicholson, who hasn't got a cap yet, Eddie Bailey, who makes his debut in the 3rd match against Spain. That's Eddie Bailey plays in that game. That's his first game. And Alf Ramsey.
Yeah.
So those 4 Trojans of Tottenham's team in the 1950s, they've been playing in the second division, and in fact, Tottenham have played for 5 years in the second division since the end of the war. No doubt, or reservations about putting them into the team, into the squad. And as I say, 2 of them play in World Cup matches. Others who play in World Cup matches while with second division teams. So Johnny Haynes, we mentioned, Ronnie Clayton, and Alan Court, of course, in that 58 team. So it's no problem to Winterbottom to pick second division players for matches which are absolutely essential. One curious thing you mentioned is this incidence of third division players turning up in the England team, which, I mean, you and I probably do both remember one Steve Bull playing for England in, would that be about 1990, wouldn't it? I think Steve Bull.
Well, I think,
Steve
yes,
Bull was a third division player.
Was he? I
Yeah.
thought he was second by then, but maybe I'm wrong. I remember Peter Taylor,
Yeah, I do too.
the winger, who he was playing for Palace in the third division when he played for England, and that would have been in the late 70s.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So these 3 who that we've got here, Tommy Lawton of
Yes.
Notts County. Now, Tommy Lawton is an odd character, isn't he? So these are third division players who are picked for England, and that seems extraordinary. Tommy Lawton is, of course, he played for England before the war. He's the best centre forward in England straight after the war. So, and he's replaced eventually by the likes of Nat Lofthouse and Stan Mortensen, those type of Jackie Milburn. And I think he's of that type. He's a big, bruising centre forward. He's playing for Notts County in the third division North, I expect. But he's there for different reasons, isn't he? He's there for financial reasons, really, I think. He's not there because that's good for his career or because he believes in or because he's a big Notts County fan. He's there because the money, I think, has been worked out in such a way that that it's going to be to his advantage. But the other 2, Reg Matthews of Coventry. Yeah. So Reg Matthews is a goalie who plays for Coventry in the third division, and he gets a cap in. He gets capped in 50. He gets 5 caps, I think, capped in 56-7. So late 50s. At a time when, as we said, England are looking for a goalkeeper. They're looking as far as the third division for their goalkeeper. Yes. I mean, that is a remarkable fact. But because it's not, they find what they're looking for there in many ways. It's not as if there aren't going to be any players in the third division worth their while picking. And then Johnny Byrne for Crystal Palace in the early 60s. Well, Crystal Palace, of course, in those days were quite possibly in the fourth division. I think they might have been in the fourth division in the early 60s. Anyway, they were nowhere near where they are now. Yeah. And Johnny Byrne didn't stay there very long after all. He went to West Ham, didn't he? Where he should, perhaps in many ways, have been in the 1966 World Cup squad. But with caps for Palace in the third division. Reg Matthews, by the way, this is a sign of the times, was last heard of after he retires he gets a transfer, doesn't he? I think he goes to Chelsea, but it doesn't really work out. I think that's right. That's what happens in his career.
Right.
And he ends up on the production line at Massey Ferguson making tractors. And in a way, that's a sort of, I mean, what an extraordinary career he had. Playing quite cheerfully in the third division, gets picked for England, ends up back on the production line at Longbridge. It's
it's a world away, isn't it?
It is, and it is a world away, and it's an extraordinary narrative. Yes. Do we think that could it happen now?
I find it very. I think the only way it could happen now would be just bizarre circumstances coming together. I mean, you could just about see a situation maybe if, for example, Manchester City were relegated because of the rules around financial fair play. You could imagine a scenario like that, where perhaps they had a team outside the Premier League that had international players. you maybe you could have a situation of somebody coming along and pumping money into, like for example, at the moment, Birmingham City,
Yes.
just relative to the third tier, had a lot of money pumped into them. Yes, if that happened to a championship side, but even that is made less likely by financial fair play rules because you've got to demonstrate that you're making that money. So I think there's going to be it's just going to be very few and far between for England. There's
I mean,
just so many teams. There's just so many. I suppose what you get now, much more than you used to get, far more than you used to get, would be players playing for England who were struggling to get in the first team
yeah, true.
of a Premiership team. Maybe in a way, they're the equivalent. Maybe they're the modern. Maybe that's the modern equivalent
Indeed.
to
Yes.
to the old idea of the second division player playing for England.
Yes, you're
That
right.
that if you look at I mentioned City before. If you looked at Manchester City, it you could imagine a scenario where somebody like Phil Foden
Yeah.
lost his place in the City side,
Yeah.
but was but but was a key player in next year's World Cup for England.
Yeah. Yeah.
That 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 doesn't seem far fetched, and yeah, it just occurs to me that maybe that's the equivalent. That's more the equivalent to the old thing of second division
No, I
players.
agree. And I think we can take that further and say that England managers are quite happy to say they won't pick players who aren't in the first team. Although I think that's a bit of an anachronism because actually, I'm not even sure that there are sort of first teams in the way that there were.
No, no,
So,
no.
you go back to the days of Leeds, for example, behind you, and I mean, you could do the same as I can. Sprake, Reenie Cooper, Bremner, Charlton Hunter, Lorimer, Clark, Jones, Giles Gray. That
Mm,
was the team. And
yeah.
but you can't possibly do that nowadays. Nowadays, players are squad players, And
I
so,
mean,
for example,
I think
Foden,
I'm right in saying in that Leeds team in their first season off, they were only, I think there were only 11 players who had appearances in double figures. So you can easily see which were the first team players.
yes, absolutely,
You know,
yes,
there's the odd player who played three times because there were injuries
yeah, mixed
to to,
rates,
to teammates. Yeah, but you can see what you can have a quick look and see which were the first team players because they're the only ones who had double figure
yes, that's right,
appearances.
yes. No, I think managers can say now they won't pick players who aren't in the first team, but they can't really say that they won't pick players that aren't in the first division or in Premier League. But
Mm.
actually, they don't really need to, do they? Because I mean, as far as I can see, there were actually no candidates for. I mean, what's the nearest one can get in recent years? Either someone like Jamie Vardy ending up in the second division, a little
Yeah.
bit like Tom Finney, where he's far better than the club.
Mm.
Being rude, he's a better
It's
than
yeah.
he's
Yeah.
better than the club, and but he's just staying out of loyalty. One could imagine a situation where that happens, but it's very
I
hard
mean,
to.
I think last season did James Trafford, the who was at Burnley,
Yeah,
then he's just been sold to City.
yes,
Um,
very good.
sold back to City. He was in the squad, uh, but it's obviously the exception that proves the rule. I suppose goalkeepers.
Yeah, a bit different, isn't it?
There's a lot of overseas goalkeepers
Yeah,
in the Premier League,
yeah,
and clearly that's a specialised position in a way that no other is
yeah.
to the same degree. So you get circumstances like that, but it's very much the exception. And it's just that the clubs just scoop the big Premier League clubs just scoop up so many players.
And the players want to go.
Yeah,
I mean, the Jamie Vardy example is real old school. It belongs to a different era, which is why
it does.
partly why people warm to him. It's because
Mm,
he reminds us of a type of football setup that doesn't
Yes,
exist anymore, but we wish did.
yes,
The other,
yeah, and players. I mean, now it's just the norm that you're a player of a certain level. If you get relegated, if your club gets
yeah,
relegated,
yeah.
you don't.
No, indeed, yeah, true. Very true.
The individual player is
Mm.
is is not relegated. Um, when Leicester went down uh, the time before last,
Half the
James Maddison,
half the first team left.
yeah, somebody like James Maddison wasn't relegated.
No, no, indeed, yeah.
Off he goes.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in the area that we're looking at, a team would be relegated, and it was that team that was relegated. The individual
Yeah,
players
yeah. Yeah.
went down with their
But you know,
club.
no, indeed, as Tom Finney was told by Preston North End's chairman, they'll play for Preston or they won't play at all. And they
Yeah,
could say that. So if Preston go down to the second division because of whatever shortcomings in their defence or whatever, then that doesn't affect the fact that Tom Finney is still going to be turning out for Preston. And what's more, because it's a relatively flat pyramid, he's still playing against, I mean, he probably came up against international players playing for opposition in the second division as well, because international managers were willing to pick second division players. And
mm,
so, and particularly, with sort of Welsh and Irish and Scottish players, it
mm.
probably the fall off in standard is probably not that high. We're just coming to the end. Would very quickly, is it possible for a team? I mean, I was going to say, is it possible for a team to come up from the second division and actually or the championship and actually stay up? Do you think that just at the beginning of the 20, whatever it is, 25, 26 season, I read today in the papers that Brentford are predicted to finish 18th. That means that one of Leeds, Burnley, and Sunderland are going to finish above them.
Yeah.
I actually think the games between Brentford and those teams are going to be the key matches for Brentford in this season. That's the little league they're playing, they're participating.
Yeah.
But I still
I
think,
think it's a feeling that Sunderland might have bought well,
ah,
and strangely, even though they're the team that came up through the playoff and therefore would in that way seem the more likely to go down. I have a sneaking feeling that they made to look very, very silly indeed, and they finished with a record low points score. But
yeah,
I think Sunderland have got a better chance than people might think. I certainly hope it doesn't become the norm,
time will tell, Carl, and time is
as
up.
as has happened in the last two seasons.
Yeah, indeed, yeah,
For,
yeah.
for all,
No,
for all three to go down, I think the league becomes a farce when that
I'm
happens.
afraid you're right. Nice one. So interesting. So much change. And I think not for the better, but others will have their
Yeah,
own view. Cheers,
yeah.
Carl.
Lovely, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.